Okay, let's unpack this. Today, we are undertaking a deep dive into an institution whose history spans the vast, turbulent landscape of American education, the college social fraternity, Theta Xi, or Eta. But this isn't just a survey of Greek life, it's really a study in institutional adaptation and, well, survival.
It truly is. And what's great is that we have a single, highly concentrated stack of sources here, a really comprehensive overview of Theta Xi's identity. It lets us trace a very clear organizational path from, the Civil War all the way to the 21st century.
And our mission for you, the listener, is not just to absorb facts. We want to extract the crucial, sometimes really surprising nuggets of knowledge that define this organization. How did it manage to survive? What philosophical commitments kept it grounded? And how did it evolve through a century and a half of massive societal change, especially given the very specialized nature of its founding?
The story is remarkable precisely because of that context. When we talk about social fraternities, most of them, they trace their origins to the antebellum period or, the post-Civil War boom. Theta Xi holds a truly unique distinction among all established social fraternities today. It was the only one founded during the American Civil War.
That is just a staggering piece of organizational trivia. April 29th, 1864, the nation is actively tearing itself apart, casualties are astronomical, and yet a group of students at Rensselaer Polytechnic Institute, RPI, in Troy, New York, they're actively committing themselves to building a new unified society. The level of focus required to launch something like that at that exact moment, it must have been intense.
And that intensity, I think, informs the entire organization's philosophy. The motto, Juncti Juvant, which translates powerfully to United They Serve, it takes on this profound, almost existential meaning when your world is defined by division and military necessity. It suggests an immediate essential need for cohesion, utility, and purpose. It wasn't about leisure, it was about utility right from the start.
So we have the core pillars established then, RPI, 1864, this imperative of unity, and the specialized technical focus that RPI implies. So what's the scope of this organization today?
Today, it maintains a pretty significant national footprint. The organization currently boasts over 60,000 initiated members since its founding. They operate approximately 45 active chapters and, according to the sources, 2 colonies as well.
Okay, just to quickly clarify for the listener, because you hear these terms thrown around. In the Greek system, what exactly is the difference between a chapter and a colony?
That's a great question. A colony is essentially a chapter in its probationary phase. So
Yeah.
it's a group of men recognized by the national organization, but they're still proving their viability. They're meeting recruitment goals, organizational metrics, financial stability, all of that before they get officially chartered as a full chapter. Colonies are basically where the organization is actively trying to expand.
Got it. That makes sense. It's like a startup phase. And we know that their Grand Lodge, their national headquarters, has recently established roots in downtown Atlanta, which is a major shift we'll definitely get into later. But first, let's go back to that wartime origin. We really have to drill down into that specific RPI origin because it just seems to set the organization's DNA. This was not founded as a classical literary society, which was like the norm for fraternities then, right?
Right.
It was established at RPI specifically as an engineering fraternity. How radical was that specialization at the time?
Oh, it's a critical differentiator. I mean, in
Right.
the mid-19th century, the cultural cachet was all in classical education philosophy, history, rhetoric. RPI, however, was dedicated to practical science and engineering. So founding an engineering fraternity in 1864 was a conscious choice to prioritize applied knowledge. These men were interested in solving tangible problems in construction and in technical mastery, while other groups might have been focused purely on, intellectual debate or social status. Their priorities were inherently practical and solution-oriented from day one, which ties right back to United They Serve.
That practicality is just embedded in their identity. But the path to founding was anything but smooth or planned. Our sources detail a fascinating precursor, a local fraternity called Sigma Delta, established in 1859. And it existed primarily to rival another secret society, Theta Delta Chi.
And this tells us 2 things immediately. 1, they were already operating within a competitive environment. And 2, Sigma Delta was characterized by vigorous internal discussion. It was a space that encouraged debate, and sometimes, that encouragement of intellectual friction is exactly what leads to a split.
And the schism wasn't over some grand political or philosophical stance, but a really small, personal moment of friction that just became the breaking point. It all centered on one person, George Bradford Brainerd.
Precisely. On October 30th, 1863, Brainerd tendered his resignation from Sigma Delta, And this incident, while it seems minor on the surface, it immediately destabilized the group. But what makes the story so compelling is the reaction. The resignation was unanimously declined.
Wait, hold on. If they declined the resignation, they wanted him to stay. So why did that specific rejection create an unfixable rift? That seems counterintuitive.
That's the psychological brilliance of this moment, isn't it? They wanted him to stay, which shows he was valued, but they couldn't resolve the underlying tension that made him want to leave in the first place. So by refusing his request to exit gracefully, they forced him and those aligned with him to remain in a kind of pressure cooker. The sources note that despite the decline, the incident created a lasting, irreparable break. The tension was now concentrated, and the only viable path for Brainerd and his allies was to create a new organization where they could control the direction.
So the inability of the original group to manage internal conflict led directly to the formation of its rival.
Wow.
And they didn't waste any time. They immediately began discussing affiliation with an established national organization, Sigma Phi.
Right, but Sigma Phi declined their offer, which ironically only strengthened the resolve of the splinter group. That refusal just solidified their need for total independence. By March 12, 1864, they were already voting on members for this new, unnamed organization.
And the organizational pace was just astounding. They finalized the new constitution in the first few weeks of April with a key committee including Brainerd, Waite, Buell, and Packard.
And even the naming process reflects this meticulousness you'd expect from future engineers.
Yeah.
They weren't satisfied with just, choosing cool-sounding letters. On April 6, 2 monograms were presented, Theta Xi and Theta Xi. And Theta Xi was chosen specifically to avoid confusion with an existing local fraternity called Theta Xi at Yale.
That attention to detail, avoiding future institutional clutter, that's profound. They were thinking about their place in the broader national system from the very first moment. They were aiming for clarity, avoiding any unnecessary complication in their symbolic identity down the line.
Exactly. And this rapid organizational effort, driven by 8 founders, George Bradford Brainerd, Samuel Buell Jr., Henry Harrison Farnham, Peter Henry Fox, Ralph Gooding Packard, Thomas Cole Raymond, Nathaniel Henry Starbuck, and Christopher Champlin Waite, all culminated in the April 29, 1864 founding. 8 men focused on unity, technology, and organizational clarity during the peak of the deadliest conflict in American history. Just incredible.
Okay, so let's analyze the immediate so what of that origin. How did this specialized RPI-based identity shape their early growth, say, over the next 4 decades?
Well, the growth pattern reinforces the identity perfectly. For the first 40 years, so up to about 1905, they were strategically very selective. Look at their initial expansion targets: Yale, Stevens Institute of Technology, MIT, Columbia University, Cornell University, and Lehigh University.
That's not simply expanding geographically, that's securing power bases. They were recruiting from the most influential technical and scientific pipelines in the entire country at that time.
That's it, exactly. It shows an organization that knew its value proposition. They focused heavily on technology and science schools, consolidating their strength within the technical elite of the Northeast. They weren't casting a wide net for just any social club. They were strategically targeting institutions that were aligned with their founding identity as an engineering fraternity.
It's a very calculated, almost clinical approach to expansion, and they maintain a profound respect for those founding structures. The original RPI chapter house, the birthplace, is recognized for its historical significance. It was listed on the National Register of Historic Places in 2013.
And listing a chapter house on a National Historical Register, that speaks to the architectural and cultural longevity of the place itself. It's not just about the organization. It's about the physical structure embodying that history.
And that connection remains tangible, even in the modern era. In 2014, when the fraternity celebrated its sesquicentennial 150 years, the National Convention was specifically held back in Troy, New York. They chose to ground their major anniversary in the physical location where that initial engineering blueprint was drawn up, during the height of the war.
It grounds their identity and maintains the narrative continuity. They may be a national social fraternity now, but they're actively paying tribute to that original engineering blueprint. It's still part of their core story.
Okay, so that initial focused expansion set the stage. But around 1905, the organization must have realized that to survive and grow into a true national entity, they couldn't just stay confined to the Northeast corridor. We see a profound strategic shift.
Yes, the strategy shifts from consolidation to broad expansion. They needed to access new talent pools, which reflected the national decentralization of technology and industry. In 1905, the westward expansion begins. They start targeting major academic centers outside the East Coast establishment, specifically Purdue University in Indiana and Washington University in St. Louis.
And they just keep pushing. By 1910, they establish a presence on the West Coast at UC Berkeley. Then in 1921, they established their first Southern chapter at LSU. This geographic spread is the organizational equivalent of admitting they're no longer just an engineering fraternity, but a national social college fraternity that retains engineering as, a strong component of its identity.
And this expansion naturally leads to the biggest organizational upheaval in their history. And that's the 1962 merger with Kappa Sigma Kappa, or COC. This was not a hostile takeover or anything like that. It was a necessary consolidation. COC was a smaller, struggling fraternity.
Mergers are tricky in the corporate world, but in Greek life, where identity is so rooted in tradition, symbols, ritual, they have to be incredibly complex. This event, finalized on August 20, 1962, meant Theta Xi had to sacrifice parts of its own identity to fully integrate this new lineage.
And that institutional calculation, the willingness to jettison core symbols, that tells us that the long-term viability and expanded membership base outweighed the cost of losing old traditions. It was integration over pure organizational conquest. It was a true embodiment of Juncti Juvant, united they serve, and in this case, united they compromise.
Let's look closely at those changes because they really illustrate the depth of this identity shift. They weren't just administrative.
Not at all. Take the coat of arms, for example. The existing symbol, which carried decades of history, was changed to incorporate crescent moons. Those were specifically pulled from the Kappa Sigma Kappa tradition. This meant altering a visual identifier that represented the organization to the entire outside world.
Wow. And even the smaller, more sensory traditions were subject to change. They changed the fraternity flower from the white carnation to the blue iris. Why is changing the flower such a powerful symbolic shift? It seems small on the surface.
Because a fraternity flower is a small, constant, tangible reminder of history. It's used in rituals, decorations, celebrations. To change it is to publicly announce that the old tradition is secondary to the new, unified identity. It forces every member, new and old, to accept the incorporated lineage of Kank.
And the practical educational material was updated too, which signals complete rebranding of the experience. The membership manual changed titles from the Theta Xi Pledge Manual to the much more evocative and aspirational title, The Quest for Theta Xi.
And that name change? It implies a significant shift in pedagogical approach. A manual suggests instructions and rules. A quest suggests a guided journey of personal development, an ongoing search for self-improvement and meaning. It repositioned the fraternity experience as a profound personal odyssey, unifying the two groups under a shared, forward-looking ideal.
It's a remarkable example of organizational flexibility. Now let's track the movement of their administrative home base, which gives us a timeline of where the organization saw its future. For decades, since 1924, they were anchored in St. Louis.
St. Louis provided decades of stability. And this commitment was enshrined in 1964, when the new memorial headquarters was formally dedicated in St. Louis to mark the centennial. That building served as the spiritual and administrative home for 37 years, until 2001.
Moving from your centennial home is a major organizational decision. So we see the modern shift in October 2022. They opened their new headquarters in downtown Atlanta at 260 Peachtree Street, NW. So they're moving from the Midwest to a modern, dynamic hub in the Southeast.
This move is fascinating, and, it invites speculation. Why Atlanta? Well, it's a major transportation hub. It offers access to a rich talent pool for the national staff, and it puts the administration closer to a significant number of institutions in the South and Southeast, which reflects current demographic and collegiate growth. It's a strategic move for operational efficiency and modern relevance.
But the move didn't cut all ties. The financial structure remains committed to the anchor city.
Correct. While the Grand Lodge moved to Atlanta, the address for the Theta Xi Foundation, which is the educational, nonprofit, and philanthropic arm that remains in St. Louis. This creates a kind of dual citizenship, if you will. The operational administration is focused on the future in Atlanta, while the financial and educational continuity is maintained in their historical anchor city, St. Louis. This provides a lot of stability for the alumni donor base.
That speaks volumes about balancing innovation with tradition. And speaking of balancing tradition and future identity, we have to introduce the patron saint. This decision was largely driven by one man, William S. Mason, a major supporter and benefactor.
Yes, Mason was the main force behind the fraternity, adopting Benjamin Franklin as its patron saint.
Benjamin Franklin. So we started with engineering and RPI in 1864, but now, a century later, the organization formally adopts a figure of the Enlightenment, of civic virtue, invention, and intellectual curiosity. How radical was this strategic expansion of their core identity?
I think it was a necessary and, frankly, brilliant expansion. Adopting Franklin signifies a definitive evolution away from a purely RPI, purely technical engineering identity. Franklin wasn't a structural engineer, but he was the ultimate pragmatic polymath. An inventor, a writer, a statesman, a master of self-improvement, and a deeply responsible civic leader. He perfectly embodies the idea of a comprehensive citizen, someone who serves his country, improves his mind, and applies practical knowledge. It synthesizes the technological roots with the modern commitment to civic and holistic growth, and it perfectly complements that new aspirational quest for Theta Xi manual title.
Right. It sets the standard that members shouldn't just be good engineers or good students. They must be good men who contribute practically to society, just like Franklin. And that ideal of comprehensive growth, the Franklin ideal, is formally codified in their organizational purpose statement. It defines the fraternity not as a temporary club, but as a college home environment, where fellowship and alumni guidance lead to comprehensive growth.
And they explicitly lay out the scope of that growth, stating 4 distinct types: mental, moral, physical, and spiritual. This positions the fraternity as a holistic developer, actively stepping in to support and augment what the college and community are doing. The stated goal is to make members more mature and chapter groups more useful units of society.
But what is truly remarkable is that they don't just leave this as a vague platitude. They provide an institutional blueprint. They break down 7 specific, numbered goals they endeavor to assist each member in developing. This is the organizational algorithm for success. Let's dedicate some time to breaking down these 7 pillars, because they really are the heart of the modern mission.
Let's do it. Let's start with the first pillar, the intellectual foundation, intellectual curiosity. It's described as assuring the highest scholarship rating consistent with his ability.
That specific phrasing is key, consistent with his ability, unquote. It's an incredibly nuanced approach to scholarship. They aren't just demanding a 4.0 GPA from everyone, which, might be unrealistic depending on the curriculum or the student. They're setting a standard of maximal, ethical, and sustained individual effort. It acknowledges that ability varies, but the expectation for trying your best should not. It ties directly back to Franklin's pursuit of knowledge through constant learning.
The second pillar focuses on the physical structure that houses that curiosity. Habits that lead to better mental and physical health. This is a surprisingly modern inclusion for an organization founded in the 1860s. We know now, through constant research, the critical feedback loop between physical wellness, sleep, nutrition, and intellectual performance. This foresight suggests an understanding that sustained mental growth requires a foundation of sound, self-maintained health.
Then we move into the social and emotional realm with the third goal: sincerity and confidence. Specifically, sincerity in his association with others and confidence in himself. This addresses both the internal psychology and the external social mandate. You have to be genuine with others, but first, you have to possess the self-awareness and security to be confident in your own actions. It's the emotional intelligence component of maturity.
Exactly. And pillar number 4 is the bedrock of their motto: responsibility. This is defined by a clear, concentric circle of obligations to chapter, college, community, and country. This structure is profound because it scales the concept of duty. A young man learns responsibility first in his immediate managed environment, the chapter, and then applies those lessons to progressively wider spheres of influence.
That scalability teaches members that civic engagement isn't some abstract concept. It begins with, cleaning your own house and showing up for the people closest to you. Then goal number 5 covers leadership, defined as leadership that comes from practicing the principles of democratic self-government.
This is a direct linkage back to Benjamin Franklin, the statesman. The chapter house, by this definition, is explicitly positioned as a training ground for democracy. Leadership is presented not as some natural talent you're born with, but as a learned behavior derived from running an organization ethically and democratically, through elections, budgeting, and accountability.
Right. And moving to the 6th goal, which expands the application of intellectual life. Interests and activities outside regular scholastic studies that employ spare time to advantage.
This directly combats the notion of a purely academic life. A well-rounded individual can't be confined to the library. This is that practical, Franklinian focus on industriousness, encouraging members to use non-academic time constructively, whether that's through intramural sports, campus clubs, or creative pursuits.
And finally, the seventh point, which is the necessary safety net for dealing with life's unpredictable nature, spiritual understanding. And this is described not in terms of religion, but as providing a reservoir of strength to draw upon when faced with conditions beyond comprehension.
What's so critical here is the non-denominational framing. It's not prescribing a specific faith or dogma, but rather promoting the capacity for internal fortitude, resilience, and perspective when you're confronted with crisis or grief or existential mysteries. It's the existential pillar that supports the rest of the structure, ensuring that the student is robust in the face of uncertainty.
If you look at those 7 goals altogether, they truly define a complete aspirational blueprint for the ideal student. They are essentially providing an ethical algorithm or a template for moral action, countering the unstructured nature of modern education where students often feel, adrift. This institutional clarity is what sets them apart.
It creates a sense of profound purpose that ties their 1864 need for unity directly to modern holistic development. Now, let's quickly look at the tangible and conceptual symbols that embody these highly defined ideals.
We already know the motto, Juncti Juvant, united they serve. That's the foundation.
The most formal identifier is the badge. It's a monogram of Theta Xi, highly ornate, set with 20 pearls and either a diamond or a ruby in the bar. It conveys a clear sense of history, prestige, and formality.
The colors are azure blue and silver, a very striking and dignified combination. And the flower, we have to remember, is the blue iris, which was adopted during the merger.
And the mascot choice is equally distinctive and meaningful, the unicorn. Their publication is fittingly named the Unicorn.
A unicorn is a mythological creature embodying grace, purity, and uniqueness. For an organization that was the only one founded during the Civil War and maintains all these unique traditions, adopting the unicorn, it just underscores their aspirational uniqueness and singular identity in the Greek system.
Absolutely. And finally, the pledge pin, which is also altered post-merger, is a white enamel circle with a blue shield, incorporating that traditional CAC design element. All of these symbols, they work together to reinforce the concepts of unity, aspirational ideals, and the structured character development rooted in those 7 pillars.
So those 7 pillars demand outward action, and that brings us to the organization's external impact, specifically their commitment to national philanthropy, or NSP. They have a pretty sophisticated dual service model.
They do. The first national project was adopted way back in 1974 at their 111th anniversary convention. They committed to the fight against multiple sclerosis, MS, as their primary national service project.
And their dedication wasn't superficial. The commitment was measured and sustained over a long time. We know that Theta Xi was named the Outstanding Volunteer Organization for 1985-86 by the National Multiple Sclerosis Society. Receiving that level of official recognition from the charity itself, that speaks volumes about a decade of focused fundraising and volunteer work.
That success established serious credibility for them in the service space. But recognizing that chapters need diverse ways to engage, they strategically adopted a second, alternate NSP in 1993, Habitat for Humanity.
For an organization whose history began as an engineering fraternity, Habitat for Humanity is the perfect modern outlet, isn't it? It's a return to the roots of applied knowledge-building things, not just debating philosophy. It allows chapters to engage in physical service, which appeals to technical majors and hands-on workers, and it complements the fundraising required for MS research.
This overarching commitment to education and service is underpinned by their financial engine, the Theta Xi Foundation, which dates back to 1949. The foundation's purpose is a direct reflection of the 7 pillars, promoting the education and growth of members into responsible citizens who will contribute to the well-being of society.
So how does the foundation ensure that these mission statements actually translate into tangible support and leadership development? It's one thing to have a mission, another to execute it.
The financial model is built on alumni loyalty and lifetime commitment. It's primarily funded by alumni and friends. And the resources are channeled through 2 primary funds, the Chapter Education Fund and the Unicorn Fund. These funds are responsible for sponsoring critical leadership development programs that really formalize the training aspect of the fraternity experience.
Okay, let's detail those structured educational programs, because they represent the institutionalization of pillar number 5, that idea of leadership derived from democratic self-government.
Right. The first major academy was established in 1999, the President's Academy. This is a training ground specifically designed to equip new chapter presidents with the skills they need for effective, ethical chapter management. It focuses on the highest level of chapter governance. It's about training the men who are in power.
And they realized that leadership development needed to start much earlier than that. So in 2006, they expanded the offerings to include the Rising Stars Academy.
This is a crucial strategic step designed to prevent complacency. It targets first-year initiates, aiming to make them active and engaged immediately. It addresses that common organizational challenge of demonstrating the value proposition beyond the social aspects to the newest members. It shows them the path to leadership is available from day one.
They also sponsor various district leadership academies, ensuring that this structured education is available regionally, not just nationally. The entire framework of academies transforms the fraternity from just a social gathering into a proven leadership incubator.
Now, we have to turn to perhaps the single most unique and frankly daring feature of the modern identity of Theta Xi, something that truly tests the institutional limits of Juncti Juvant and local autonomy. We're talking about the Beta Alpha chapter at Georgia Tech.
This chapter represents a real organizational exception to the rule, and it's related directly to that seventh pillar, spiritual understanding. In 1974, the Beta Alpha chapter at Georgia Tech chose to become a dedicated Christian chapter.
And here is the singular defining feature that's recognized across the entire national Greek landscape. It remains a full member of Theta Xi, which is a secular national fraternity, and a full member of the Georgia Tech Interfraternity Council, or IFC.
Wait, let me just clarify for the listener. The IFC, the Interfraternity Council, that's the campus governing body for all fraternities. So this chapter is fully integrated into the official campus structure and the National Theta Xi structure, despite having an explicitly religious mission.
That's correct. The sources confirm that this is the only Christian chapter of a secular national fraternity in the United States. This is an unbelievable balancing act. It means the national organization, which has to maintain its non-denominational secular mandate, allows a local chapter to interpret the pillar of spiritual understanding in an openly Christian religious context.
Wow. So what does that balancing act imply about the organization's fundamental values? Does it suggest that they prioritize unity and local autonomy above all else, even if it means bending the interpretation of their national identity?
I think it absolutely exemplifies the challenge of maintaining broad unity while allowing for strong niche identities. The national body has to respect the local chapter's religious commitment, provided that chapter still fulfills all the organizational duties, financial obligations, and leadership training required by the national framework. It shows incredible institutional flexibility, where the pursuit of membership maturity is respected even if the pathway is unique.
So did this model ever successfully spread, or is Georgia Tech truly the anomaly here?
There was one recorded attempt to replicate the model. The Gamma Phi chapter at Georgia Southern University adopted the Christian model in 2008. However, our sources indicate that this chapter has since reverted back to the traditional non-religious status.
That reversion is really telling. Does that suggest that maintaining any specific religious identity within a secular national organization is fundamentally unstable? Or was the Georgia Tech chapter simply established at a uniquely opportune time in the 1970s?
It suggests that while the model is clearly viable at Georgia Tech, perhaps due to specific institutional or alumni support there, replicating that balance is extremely difficult to sustain over time. The decades-long commitment of the Georgia Tech chapter makes it a truly extraordinary and unique living experiment in organizational resilience and flexibility.
It's the ultimate test of their motto, isn't it? Can the unified organization survive when local chapters serve in fundamentally different ways? And the answer, at least at Georgia Tech, has been a resounding yes for almost 50 years.
So let's quickly synthesize the major evolutionary steps that have defined Theta Xi over its 160-year history.
It began with an identity forged in crisis founded during the Civil War in 1864 as a hyper-focused engineering fraternity at RPI. It managed its early growth strategically, targeting the technical elite of the Northeast.
Then its identity was fundamentally reshaped by that 1962 merger with Kappa Sigma Kappa, requiring the permanent alteration of its most cherished symbols and traditions. That really signaled its commitment to adaptation and survival.
And its mission is outward-focused, with a dual commitment to national service supporting multiple sclerosis and Habitat for Humanity. And internally, it defines the ideal member through the aspirational structure of 7 specific pillars, covering everything from maximizing intellectual curiosity to achieving spiritual understanding.
And this institutional flexibility allows for truly unique expressions of local identity, exemplified by the secular national organization accommodating the singular Christian chapter at Georgia Tech.
It's a story of constant, deliberate adaptation and high institutional clarity. But let's leave you with this final provocative thought, connecting all the threads we've discussed today.
The organization committed itself to 7 specific points of development, demanding mental, moral, physical, and spiritual growth, backed by formalized educational funding and leadership academies. If their core purpose is united they serve, consider the ultimate evolution, their choice to adopt Benjamin Franklin, the ultimate symbol of enlightenment, self-improvement, invention, and civic engagement, as their patron saint.
What specific knowledge or skill set is Franklin meant to inspire in a 21st century student, particularly one focused on technology or engineering, 160 years after the organization's inception? How does the man who invented the lightning rod and founded libraries perfectly embody the modern, multifaceted mission of unity, service, and spiritual resilience in today's complex academic landscape? That is the question of legacy and inspiration we leave with you today.